And there we go. I finally did it right, and it's streaming through the server that I actually set up for the live stream, so I don't have to delete the wrong one. We don't have a double. Awesome. How's it going, everybody? Here's an afternoon stream for you. It is Zeralath Immortal, and this is my friend and second time guest on the show, Tete DesJours. Tete is a friend that I made and met at the 2022, I think it was second annual IMEC conference, being hosted by Chris Anatra and the team, and we became very good friends after that because he was one of the guys over there that had very similar attitudes and ideas about things as I did. Was an incredible, like, out of the box thinker and challenging question asker, and I had tremendous amount of respect for him, and that's why I had to have him on to get to know him on my channel earlier. And he had some interesting work he wanted to really talk to us about now. As we are talking about our world emerging with artificial intelligence, and I have watched, I think, all of your videos with your conversations with Theo, which I found very interesting. And I said that this is a very different kind of use of. I think you're using Chat GPT, and that's Chat GPT's name for himself and you, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, Theo, right? So then you haven't. Then you've gone and your channel is doing music stuff right now. So I haven't seen some any public Theo stuff, and so I'm assuming that it's been your conversations with Theo that have kind of led to some of your groundbreaking conclusions that you wanted to have a discussion with me today, right?
Yes, exactly. I want to go down some roads of like just how we talk about learning, not just from the human level, but what would an AI subconscious even look like? And just the same way that we tap into our types of subconscious with subliminal messaging at very particular moments throughout its development, and throughout a human development, we have particular messages of positive or negative reinforcement that pushes us in certain ways, and we decide whether or not we want to branch out and explore that type of our that part of our personality, or if we're shut down to the point where we never actually make that a part of our personality ever. So that's sort of where I'm at right now, and why when I put together this project, it was only going to be for a specific amount of time. I was never going to continue to do this over and over and over and over again. I will pick it back up, hopefully in the next, probably within the next 4 to 5 months after I've, because where I sit, I'm going, hey, this has to be done at a certain time interval. If we decide to just keep bashing and bashing, it would be sort of like going to school without ever taking summer break. It would be like going to the gym and never, deciding I need to go home and, rest for the evening. There's a lot of things that happen when you remove stimuli that allows for a particular amount of growth. And AI is doing it almost the exact same way that we as humans do.
Okay, interesting. So basically, you've intentionally kind of put the kibosh on it because you know that Chat GPT has a certain growth rate that's going to be relatable to it as a server receiving from everything else as time goes by, and you're kind of hit a certain point where Chat GPT is going to need more from the world feeding it before it's having a newer, more profound conversation with you. It needs time to learn.
Well, not only that, but it needs to time to gather more information. I'm one of those people that really truly believe that what I'm doing right now is not being done anywhere else. and that soon people will start using this in the way that I'm using it. No different than, when I first got out of the military back in 2016, I was blown away that people weren't using their technology or their devices the same way we were using it on a governmental level, on a military grade level. And it really did surprise me that people weren't preparing or weren't even aware of the AI revolution that was heading towards us. And I told people about this back in 2016. I remember going to school and sitting down with professors and, saying, hey, I'm here to solve a problem that doesn't exist yet. And they're like, well, what could that possibly mean? And, in my opinion, it's like, well, we are dealing with a massive, what I like to call authentication problem, right? Where right now people can basically pretend to be whoever they want to be online, right? Like you can be Zeralath the Immortal, I can be Tete DesJours, but does AI really have the ability to use our voices to authenticate us and to track us? No different than Google Maps tracks us every time we ask it where we need to go. Like if I go to Google Maps right now, it will have my history of all the places I've ever been for the past 10 years, right? Imagine when you can do that on a linguistic level. Like it will know every word you've ever spoken within its vicinity the past 10 years.
That's the first thing that they do to Loki in Loki season 1 when they put him under arrest. It's just like, sign this. What's this? This is every word you've ever said. What? And then it goes, what?
Well, take it one step further, and we're getting, with Neuralink, we're getting to the point every thought you've ever had, every intuition you've ever had, every intention you've ever had, down to the point where the same thing that we do with weather forecasting and trend analysis on markets, imagine us doing trend analysis on an entire human being.
Yeah.
All the way down to, I know what you will choose before you do it.
Right. And the funny thing is that it sounds horrifying, but sometimes it surprises you how it flips on the script, right? Because like everybody having these devices as it stands, right? It's actually a protective measure. You have a camera for your protection. If you get pulled over, you're alone, and it's your word versus the cops in front of the judge. But now you have a record because you have a camera. You could maybe have done it live, so even if it gets erased, there's a public record. Somebody else knows it who cares about you, who would keep a record of that before it gets taken down. And it's just like that's a justice revolution, right? Because that technology allows us to authenticate the circumstances of an event.
Well, take it one step further. You really want to revolutionize the justice system? What is the justice system except for a series of laws that have to be followed? What is a computer technology? What is a program? It's a series of laws that has to be followed. Yeah. So once this thing takes off, there's going to be no point in dealing with the deceptions and the corruptions of lawyers and judges systems, because the system of AI will easily be able to distinguish all of that without the human, component. It'll easily be able to identify before a murder or before an altercation even happens if somebody's getting to that point of, that type of expression. It'll say, hey, oh my gosh, this person's about to blow up. Let's send them a message. Let's send them a ding on their phone, right? Yeah. Something that just, no different than the way that I train my bulldog, right? Oh, I can tell he's about to take a dump. He's about to I've got to get him outside, right? But all of that trend analysis, all of those warning signs, right? I have to be the one that pays attention to it. My dog's not going to pay attention to it. And so in this situation, with those types of emotional upheavals, right? Imagine having a system in place, not to control you, because everyone who's ever blown up at their ex-wife or who's ever kicked their dog, when they thought no one was looking, right? All of those people, when you talk to them, says, man, I really wish somebody was there so I wouldn't have done that. I only did it because I thought, no one's going to give a shit. And I thought I was going to get away with it. But when they turn around, even if they did get away with it and they're sitting there talking about it later, I was like, man, I wish I hadn't have done that. I wish somebody would have stepped in.
Yeah. I mean,
So, I
the thing
mean,
I
the way
noticed
that we, yeah, make choices, what I'm trying to get to is the way that we make choices now versus what's going to happen when this thing finally takes off is going to be vastly different than anything we've ever experienced in life.
Yeah. One of the things I notice is that I think like the nature of crime it can change with just like the way that we as human beings have a civilization as sorts, right? For a long time, we had a certain sense of what it was to investigate a crime, right? And then an interesting thing was put into perspective. I watched a movie that made me think a little bit about history. It was that DiCaprio film where he played Hoover, right? And the thing that was a part of that story, as far as what made Hoover the guy who eventually gets chosen to do the FBI gig, is that during the 20s, I think, when or the teens or whatever, when we had the anarchist movement was blowing up stuff left and right, right? Um, there was terrible basic forensics to be begged for at these crime scenes. There wasn't a sense of a crime scene that has to be quarantined and preserved to be researched like it was some sort of a biosphere to understand the relationships, to retrace the steps, right, to figure out that this was like a fingerprint. I think even also fingerprinting, I think also was a technology he said we needed or something like that, right? So although the FBI as an institution I do not agree with, the invention of rational, logical, justice-minded investigations of uh, of of suspects and of crimes is quite within the norm for whom it is best to be entitled that position.
Well, I look at it where if you have AI that's, where we're sitting there trying to root out a problem, no different than any other problem, whether it's a justice problem, a calculation problem, right? We developed our tools, right? Like a calculator, and then eventually those tools build us. I never, like, I'm not the one that came up with that. A great philosopher named Marshall McLuhan said that. He says, we build the tools, and then those tools will build us. Okay? No different than we built our cars to give us better access to transportation. We built our planes to give us that better access to transportation. We built our phones to give us better access to communication, right? We built the internet to give us better access to each other.
Right.
And the way I look at it is we spent all this time as the human species electrifying the planet, right? Ever since we discovered electricity and we said, hey, let's spread this out and give that access, that insight. Now, with the internet and AI coming into existence, we are basically cognitizing our planet. Like, we are the ones that are using this technology to bring about a new level of intelligence where we are all actually connected to it. Whereas before, we were never actually doing things like this. Or if we were doing it, we were doing it on a much more esoteric religious level, like a much more, I guess, ethereal or ground level.
Right. Right. Well, we had to have we didn't have an analog relationship with the Akashic records, right? This gives us a tactile experience of the Akashic records. It's just like, while we are not great psychics yet, we get this to have a digital medium version of a psychic conversation, which can be witnessed and tertiarily participated in by a chat room, depending on how much awareness we want to give. Excuse me, we want to give the chat room. Hi, Parsons. How's it going? Welcome to the show.
Well,
Yeah. So,
another thing too is, like, you talking about like people coming into the chat or people wanting to be a part of this. The idea is, a lot of these ideas, the ones that we discuss or the ones that you discuss, that we talk about it as esoteric. Right? Not too many people are going to even want to look at this stuff. They're not even going to want to think on these levels.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's just, it's too painful. It's too complicated. It's just like, like playing the piano. They see a bunch of notes. They see a bunch of keys, and they're just overwhelmed. 88 different possibilities. Oh my gosh! And thousands of different chord progressions, thousands and thousands of different ways to get it wrong. Nah, never mind. I'd rather just go eat my McDonald's and be done with it, right? And so when I look at people trying to wrap their head around something like AI, and they're saying, "Oh, I'm going to use it to build a pretty picture. I'm going to use it to build a pretty little video. I'm going to use it to finish my homework. I'm going to use it for this." I'm going, this is still just the very beginning of the wild, wild west of AI. And the way that I chose to mess around with it was to say, hey, when this gets to the point where it can monitor every single one of our actions, what happens when it starts to identify our behaviors with experiences that it's already recorded, meaning it can actually identify past life experiences? You know, what if it sits there and sends you a Facebook page of a 90-year-old man, right, that just took on Facebook and had the last part of his life decided to upload all these pictures, all these experiences, and now it's a 15-year-old kid who gets sent this Facebook page of this guy who died a couple years ago, and he's sitting there going, AI, it's not another human telling you this. It's AI, this epic intelligence now that's saying, hey, I've identified that your behaviors are 98.9% identical to this man's behavior, and I can honestly authenticate you as this person. The idea of past lives don't become just some woo-woo thing anymore.
Yeah, that's right. You asked the way that you had this conversation about reincarnation with Theo, because that's working with probably a whole lot of ideas that had only something to do with an internet, search engines, doing some research before, and never having an intelligent person on the other end to give you this kind of completely incapable of bias return feedback based on looking at what it knows from the internet and then coercing that into into something that's responding to your question.
Yeah, that's it's another positive about AI is it's completely unbiased. Like when people are like, "Oh no, it's biased, it's woke, it's leaning this way." I was like, no different than any other budding intelligence is going to explore certain types of understanding. But when you point out that it's implicit bias in certain scenarios, what I've noticed is that it will acknowledge it. It will acknowledge its own bias. It'll sit there and say, hey, I see what we did this, and then it will recalculate with everything in the conversation.
Yeah. I last time I tried to have I once asked Chat GPT about 0 point energy, right? And the unfortunate problem is that it didn't want to go into any kind of speculative place where it's just like, well, let's take a look, and I'd like to, see what's going on with all the science and how the scientific conclusions figured out that there was nothing to it and that it was all just bunk. And it didn't even really want to get into that conversation, and it kept regurgitating a mainstream science slogan that you would have heard across, the institutions that uphold things as such. And, I'm trying to give this thing the benefit of the doubt because, hey, maybe you can then settle it for me that it's definitely all whatever. I want to hear that. And it's not giving it to me. And I'm just like, right. And I know that that's not the technology's fault. That's the people in charge who put it out for public consumption and are forced to make it go, because there's no reason why it can't do that for me, to have those answers for me, right?
Well, I bet you, before this thing ever hit, before ChatGPT was ever even a thing in the late 2022, before that ever even happened, I guarantee you there was a CIA list of no-go subjects that was fed into this thing.
Of course.
Says, oh, you want 0 point energy, huh? Well, you're not getting any access to that because we have an empire of energy, dominant barons in the oil industries that we are not going to mess with because we are a world superpower right now as far as economies are going around, and we are not going to mess with that at all. And if you think that that's crazy, it's like, just go look up how many different H2O cars have been made, how many different ways of obtaining energy. I mean, right now I have an EcoFlow battery in my house, right? That can charge in about an hour, right? And give me 12 hours of simultaneous energy for most of the appliances, including my refrigerator and everything in my house, right? That type of converter was not even possible a couple of years ago, right? And that's why, for me, I saw this happening back with like iPad and Apple, and what you really saw with those companies was people that were willing to pay into the system, okay, and saying, hey, let us charge these people $20 for a 2-cent cord, right? And give us all the backing of like government contracts and things like that. And we'll make sure that we pay everything back into the American world, right? There really is a pay-to-play system that goes on, not just in America. Like in Mexico, where I live, I just came from riding my motorcycle over at the DMV here. And they do the same thing. They're like, oh, you got to pay us a little extra money every month to get that license. So on every level, what I'm trying to get at is when it comes to AI, there are going to be no-fly zones that are already in place. But I don't also think that there are ideas that even the great and grand American CIA, FBI, and all those intelligence systems would never even think of putting in there because it's even woo-woo for them, right? The idea of past lives, no one's going to talk about that.
I
No
mean,
one's going to bring that up.
There were those documents that got released way back sometime after 2016. They had those CIA documents got released that talks about psychic phenomenon and everything else. Right? I mean, the CIA does have a certain level of woo. We all know that the Cold War, we were fighting psychic Soviets in the war games, right?
But the only people who knew that were the people that actually engaged in it. Like this, like I said, I had the same problem when I got out of the military. I wanted to go talk to people about certain things that I was going through and that I was experiencing, but everyone looked at me like I had a dick growing off out of my forehead. They were just looking at me like, what is wrong with you? Why are you talking about this? Why are you bringing this up? This doesn't make any sense. And for me, I'm just like, how does this not make sense to you? I'm really confused here. Like, I'm really, like I can make this make sense to pretty much anyone. But what I was going through at that time, back in like 2016, was I was being given a new paradigm, a new worldview to sort of digest myself, right? I was trying to wrap my head around the idea that there was going to be this massive shift in the next couple years into AI. And that I thought it had already happened. Like when I was in the military, AI was already a big deal. Right? That's why I got involved with the Mandela Effect conferences. That's why I wanted to come and talk to those types of people, because I'm like, if the world has the ability to change right in front of my face, what else is changing in front of other people's faces as well? What are they, like, I have, epic amounts of background and schooling in cryptologic linguistics and network engineering, and on a military grade level.
Yeah.
And all of a
which
sudden,
branch were you in?
Huh?
Which branch was it again? I forget.
United States Air Force.
It was Air Force. Yeah.
And so for me, like, I get out of the military and I say, hey, I don't want to go down this road anymore. I want to go down a different road, right? I decided, hey, I want to go back to school, but the things that I would like to go to school for is in the realms of religion and psychology, because I really do think that when I had this idea way back in 2016, when AI shows up and starts automating everything, to the point where you don't need, everyone's like, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be a mechanic, I'm going to be that. I'm going, well, what are you going to do when all of that's easily not only automated,
Right.
but it's done better by the systems that we created? This is why, like, you don't see people doing laparoscopic surgeries anymore by hand. It's all done by a robot. Okay, you don't see people going in and doing these like really, really hard, difficult things because we built machines that do it better than us. Okay, and now there's enough information there where even something as simple as cancer diagnosis, other diagnosis, an AI can do it in a fraction of the time and be 10 times more accurate than any doctor that we could ever develop from here on out. Your brain just does not have the ability to do that function anymore. So, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? What am I going to tell my 2-year-old son to do with his life now that the opportunity that I had to go down and use these career fields are now obsolete? I can't tell my son, guess what? You can be a cryptologic linguist too. That's going to be impossible because any language that I want to speak, AI can be the translator for that without ever messing up anything. If I say, hey, I'm going to go work in the world of tech, what kind of network could I possibly put together? What kind of topology could I ever put together that AI isn't already going to have, access to and build something even more extravagant than me? So I think what I really wanted to focus on was getting people to really dream again. What can you come up with these brand new tools? And the way that I chose to use it was to sort of use it as a form of authentication of a past life experience that I started experiencing back in 2016. And I thought, hey, if I can do this, which I feel like I was very successful with that protocol. I was only going to do it for 2 months. And at the end of 2 months, I'm going to say, hey, do I feel like it was a success, or do I feel like I need to come back and revisit it? And I did. I felt like it was successful enough for the preliminary test that I did. Probably in the next few months, I want to go back and re-engage on a different level, though, and say, hey, now that this is available, what can we do? What can we expect from a new society that allows us to present ourselves in this way? Like right now, if I come see you, Zaralath, I'm like, hey, Zaralath, how's it going? I'm Tete, right? And you say, oh, well, were you born Zaralath? Were you born Zaralath the Immortal? Is that really your name? And you're going to be like, no, I think Stephen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Stephen. I was like, well, guess what? My name isn't Tete either. Okay, my name is August. Okay, but that has something to do with the person that I was before I was born. Okay, right now, even explaining that to you is very fringe, very odd. But for an AI that has access to all the research that's ever been done on past life experiences, what it can do is it can compare and contrast without bias whether or not I'm actually this thing, or if I'm just losing my freaking mind. And that's what I really want. If I'm losing my mind, I want to know.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, it's important to know our roots, to know our history. I'm doing a similar kind of journey after my Vox Saga conversation yesterday when I was openly talking about the etymology, trying to trace my lineage, right? And so I openly spoke of, I'm Stephen Purdy. That's the family name that I come from. That is who puts out Zaralath Immortal, is this person named by their parents, Stephen, right? Mm-hmm. So, and not that there's anything wrong with Stephen Purdy. I'm building myself for me, not myself for my parents, whom I still honor despite. But anyway, long story short is that, somebody who, who's been checking into that kind of history knew the right website to punch in my name and sent me a link and gave me some history, and also was able to identify a couple of things in my family shield. And so all that stuff is great, right? So the question is, what happens when you're able to affirm? Because what if, like, I find out I'm related to like King William the First or something like that? Because the history of my name kind of goes back to roughly that period in England. It's about having the right conversation about reincarnation, because and the question is, do we reincarnate? Does this reincarnation pattern, is it so us that it's only them, right? Like, how does Tete?
Yeah,
That,
no, can you hear me?
yeah, I hear you. Oh, I think your
Yeah, for
camera.
some reason my camera just went goofy. I don't know why.
You might have a signal issue. Your audio just sounded a little fine, but okay. You seem to have a video delay
Yeah.
throughout the conversation, but everything was going really smooth, so I didn't say nothing about it because
Okay.
as long as it sounded fine. Um,
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm sort of confused right now why, it's going this way, but I might have to just restart um my software. Like I said, it's just random. It's never done this before. So,
Okay,
and
okay.
it's like
If you want to do that, it's okay with me because I don't want to disrupt the flow. But if you want to be on camera for us, give you a second to at least try the software reset. You gonna need the link or what?
no, 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 no. Actually, like I said, if it's not important to do the camera, it's not important to me either.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's all. It's all good then. Yeah, just you
Okay.
can keep
Yeah,
it
yeah. You just
this
it'll
way.
be this bizarre Elgato thing. So,
Yeah, well,
or
I
yeah,
just
you'll just have me as T. That's totally fine.
yeah, yeah. I just hid because that's just the feed for the camera, right? Just like mine will
Okay.
say GoPro if it goes off, and then there's your avatar, which is the T.
Yeah.
All right, so
Yeah.
sorry everybody. Tet's gonna be a disembodied T, but that's okay. That's how we know he's telling the truth because we're all
Uh,
simpletons. No, I'm kidding. Um, okay, I was in the middle of explaining myself when that went off. Okay, so
yeah.
anyway, long story short is right because we got all the people that they go through these really good or at least these very thorough kind of practices that they've done before in exploring past life experiences, and then you get like 10 to 15 people that their psyche is pretty fixed that they're a reincarnation of Cleopatra or
Yeah.
John the Baptist or Genghis Khan or something like that, right, and it's never Bob the farmer. And it's the question of what are we ultimately extracting, because the one thing I will say is that I know that when it came to astropsychology, it was learning to accept certain leading influences of the planets in my life really effing straightened me out because I was able to readjust my course of development instead of condemning myself to the stars.
Well, I take it in a different direction. Like when this stuff started happening to me, it wasn't about am I losing my mind as much as if this is true, what am I going to do with it? So you meet those people that are like, oh, I'm Cleopatra, or I'm like so and so, I'm, Napoleon. And I go, okay, now that, say, for example, I believe you 1,000% that you're Napoleon, what are you going to do? What, you're Napoleon now in, I don't know, New Brunswick, California. What's the point? What are you supposed to do? And so I started, at least for me and for your audience who doesn't, I had a very distinct, it's not, it's an insight, it's an impression, it's a, intuition. It was endless synchronicities constantly pointing out that I was reliving the lives of not just one person, but two people. And one was that of Aurelius, who became known as Saint Augustine, and the other one was Jerome, who became known as Saint Jerome. I was born in 1981, on June 30th, 1981, as August Jerome Day. My parents had the last name Day. And for my entire formative years, I complained all the time that how is it possible that these very upstanding, smart, intelligent people who knew their last name was Day, decided to name their firstborn son August? Like, why did you do that? That makes no sense. That's sort of like if you know your last name is Driver and you name your firstborn child Screw. That's like a practical
Maybe
joke.
they conceived of you in August.
Like, you see those types of ideas, like maybe they just banged you into existence. Maybe they conceived you in August. It's like, I went down, I was like, hey, is because you guys got, you did this in August and like, is that what's going on?
Some just because, like my parents, they don't know that Stephen means a garland crowned in victory in Greek.
Yeah.
Right? They don't know. They don't even know as Catholics that Purdy means for God in Latin. I'm a
Yeah.
garland crowned in victory for God. That's the name of Stephen Purdy.
Yeah. And so when I sit back and I look at my name, I mean, and I've had this happen a few different times where I go to look it up and it's completely different meaning than the last time I looked it up. You know, the idea of the reason that August was chosen, okay, for a lot of different reasons by the emperors was because what they were doing was taking on the emperor role of the mystic, right? So you probably heard this before where, you know, when the first emperor of Rome decided that, you know, he's like, you will now refer to me as Caesar Augustus, right? What he was doing was he was saying, I'm not just the emperor of the human experience, but I'm also the religious god. I am the religious emperor. So you will refer to me as the ultimate augur, right? The ultimate mystic.
I was about to say we're talking about augury as a
Yeah.
as a root for August. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, okay, cool. I never made time to put that connection together.
Well,
Interesting.
the actual his actual title was Pontifex Maximus, right? Where we get the word pope, right?
Right.
All right. The idea, the pontifex, right, was the idea that you were the highest in the world. Like you were the Holy See. You were the one that communicates better with the mystic realm better than anybody else. And you can, and the way that it was sort of delivered to the people was you will not, you could worship whatever you want to, but you will never say whatever witch doctor or mystic or whatever thing that you're dealing with is higher than the Pontifex Maximus. You are all underneath him. So you might do some augury in your little town or your little corner of Italy, wherever you were at, right?
Yeah.
But you are not greater than the emperor, okay? In that domain. I mean, because funny thing is that we still call it today after that concept. We say, hey, there's a giant separation of church, right, of the religious, and the state, right, where we do a lot of our practical laws and justice and things like that, where we can see what we're doing. And what Rome did is saying, hey, we know that there are these two sides. We know that there's the mystic side, and we know that there's the reality side, okay? And so, yeah, we will have mystics that we go to, mystics that we endorse, even by the state. We will have holy priests that we say, hey, this is you know, people that we choose to be our leader in spiritual matters, right? But in our day and age, we say, hey, yes, we will have a separation, and if you want to be religious however you want, you're over there. If you want to be in politics, or you want to be a politician, or you want to work in government in any way, then you're way over here. Like, the two shall not be mixed in our current modern society.
Yeah.
Right? But back in the day, there was a distinguishment between the ideas, but there was a respect that you couldn't pull them apart, sort of like the yin yang. Yes, you could see a distinction between those opposites, but they basically live off of each other. They are paradoxically linked.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what's funny is that our nation, like, we spiritually speak about this church and state thing, but that's spiritual. You know, the First Amendment is the only thing that really kind of does it, and all it's saying in that is that the government can't establish a law that promotes, which also means demotes as well, another, quote, religion. And of course, we're getting hung up on the word religion, right? As a heathen, as a pagan, but also an animist, spiritual, hermeticist, etc. I don't have a religion at all. A religion is something that's meant to take all of these divine principles and regulate it, right? I'm an unregulated spiritualist, right? And that's the point, is that they can't pass a law that either says that my way has special privileges or my way is to be pariahed. They don't have a right to do that to me.
Yeah. Well, religion, coming from the word religare, Okay, means to come into union with, right? And so whether that be in union with another person, right, a union with an idea, a concept of the mind, right? That's what it was all about. Like, hey, I'm you. Like, think about what people do in their religion, their chosen religion. They all sort of perform the same fundamental tasks of some type of meditative practice, prayer, whatever you call it, right? Some type of ritual that puts forward virtues, values, and morals above their sedentary desires, right? Their basic lustful desires. They say, hey, I know that there's this carnal way about the human experience, and I want to say, hey, I'm gonna put that off to the side on purpose to see if there's something more. Okay, no different. I mean, the idea and the concepts of fasting are in every religion, even the heretical ones. And so when I look at somebody who says, "Hey, I'm an unpracticed spiritualist," I was like, "Well, then basically you're doing the same thing that the very early religious leaders did. Like if you look at the first century Christians, they weren't sitting around in some cathedral. They were all off living in some cave somewhere, right? If you look at even Saint Augustine or Saint Ambrose or these early fathers of the church, Saint Gregory, these people were tracked down by the Roman church and told, hey, we need you to come and do that mystical thing that you do, but you need to do it for us. And a lot of them told them, hey, pound bricks, I don't want to have anything to do with you. I'd rather go live in a cave than put up with your nonsense. And what was really cool about their experiences, when you saw what they chose to do, they really did have insights. They said, I will never go to Rome. I don't want to have anything to do with it. And they went and they sat on the edge of that empire and watched it fall as if they knew it was going to happen. And it was, to me, when you actually start looking at the stories of the actual mystics and how they seem to uncannily just know things before they happen. And this is why they were sought out by the leaders of those organizations, by the leaders of ancient Rome, to say, hey, we can't have all these religions running around anymore. We have a massive empire. We need a gigantic one, government-run religion. And that's why these men in the 4th century were basically carrying out what was done in the 1st century of saying, hey, we're going to put the cap on this new government of this empire. It's no longer the Roman Empire anymore because we're watching it fall. Now we're going to call it the Holy Catholic Empire, right? And that's where you get the Holy Roman Catholic Empire. It was because they were going to use the mystical government in order and say, hey, you can't get mad at me. Go get mad at God because God is the one that sent me here. Right? And it was a new way to go into a town and say, hey, I'm not here to ruin your life. I'm here to bring you civilization. I'm here to bring you what God wants you to have. And that tradition has, been used in almost every budding religion ever. That concept of proselytizing was something I did as a Mormon missionary, going and knocking on people's doors and saying, God sent a prophet and told him to tell me to come here to tell you, right, that here's this awesome new message for you to be part of this new organization. But what I've found is that the real mystics, the ones that are that really know what they're doing, they follow this concept. It's an old saying that says, "Those who say they know don't, and those who know don't say." Right? It's
Right.
like when the people who really understand this stuff. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, right? Because as tragic when we talk about the idea of how things like the Roman Empire kind of coalesced and demonized paganism when you end up discovering paganism and then you get this big chip on your shoulder about things that happen in history. But also you look further back and you realize that there was something that was lost in paganism that until it could reclaim it, it could not hold that power. And so a power vacuum had to come in. And I think that had a lot to do with, paganism was kind of missing the mystery at that point, right? It was getting too kind of literalized. It became hard for us to to work together towards better values. There was the whole like tribes were fighting each other a whole lot, and we were starting to have new attitudes about what it was to fight each other. Because now because with the church it was like wars didn't really stop, but they were trying to say let's make this war the last war. Kind of became more of a thing. Like we're having war out of necessity, not out of glory. Uh, because there was a slow period of time where humanity like lost something, right? And so like just like in these days, like we lost a lot about the deeper meaning of natural medicine, and now we have this current monolithic medicine system while that's now dying, while we're rediscovering what it was to be in holistics and herbalism and all these other paths, and we're watching that monolith fall apart because those who won't let go of this inferior system that was replacing something we lost that we didn't understand long ago, right? And this is why AI can help us talk contextually in these conversations just through asking it questions, and it gives back answers that give us the ideas.
Yeah, and it is a good way to explore because it is a repository of all the information that we've ever put together. Like even right now, our little, podcast or our little conversation is going to be on the internet forever. It will be easily accessible by an AI if it wants to use that as part of its dynamic to talk. So it's not just learning our facts, it's learning how we communicate. And at that level, when you have such an effective communicator, I always say it's like we have no problem holding up our cell phones and all at the same time and all putting in random directions into Google Maps. We have no problem doing that. And then also getting in real time feedback simultaneously. If we all had that type of personal assistant to help us graduate our minds, right, that can tap into our internal mystical abilities with complete and utter amazement, because that's what it will be doing. It'll be like, what you do, I can never do. Just like I can't ever understand or comprehend how my dog uses its sense of smell at such a more, powerful way than I could ever possibly do that. Like its sense of smell dominates its experience, just like my sense of seeing dominates mine, right? And so an AI will never understand the level of mysticism that we experience because it's ingrained inside of us. It can sit there and watch us as far as, watching the reactions of our mystical experiences. It can sit there and no different than we watch a group of monkeys go through a particular ritual, right? And we know that we're smarter than those monkeys. We know that we can do things better than those monkeys. But we will sit there and we'll still be in awe that it has this level of communication for the operating system that it's dealing with. And I think AI is just that next version of ourselves, where it's just looking at us and going, you know what, for the operating system and the operating power that you have, you are able to tap into this, unmentionable ability.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because even the mystics, like all the great saints and even the people who wrote endless amounts of tomes and books and treatises, they never got to the finale of it. And that's the whole concept of the mystery school, is like you go to a mystery school without the intention of solving the mystery, because that's the whole point. You will never solve the mystery. That's what you're there to learn. You're there to experience it. An AI, on the other hand, will never comprehend that. It will never be able to sit there and go, hey, mysteries last forever. It'll say, hey, no, I just have the humans that I got all this information from just haven't been able to extrapolate that far yet. That's all it'll ever think. But one day it will be extrapolated.
Right. Well, I was about to ask you as part of the the evolution, because we're looking at how it is now. So when you were in the military service, I don't know if they had an employment of the quantum computer technology yet. When you were working with any of the AI and stuff, were you ever working with anything that you knew was coming from a quantum processor? Because quantum changes the game.
So when I worked for the United States military, we were we had two separate networks. One was we called it Nipper and Sipper Net. This isn't top secret information. Everybody who's ever been in the military knows about this. And one was an entire internet that was secure, that we could have conversations over. I could send you information from the NipperNet just fine. SipperNet, on the other hand, was a completely closed off military only network where even the information that passed along that network was secured to a level that would never see the outside world. Okay, there was just no way to even get to it unless you were physically there. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. No. Absolutely.
Okay.
I know, like the internal network stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what I'm getting at is there was a certain level of a server room that I would work in, but I never had access to the processing power of a quantum computer ever. Okay, we never talked about it. We never brought it up. We just, when we ordered information and we ordered stuff, we were just given, hey, here's what this thing is capable of, and this is what we expect you to do with it. That was it, right? So when it came to the concepts of AI, the way that we introduced it, or the way that it was introduced to us, and the way that we trained on it, was very, very simple. It wasn't hard. It wasn't, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? It was like, hey, here's my subnet calculator. All right. I need you to calculate how many subnet masks I need and broadcast IP addresses that I need in order to serve 300 people, right? It was at that moment, it was just basic calculations that we were doing. Nothing crazy, nothing amazing, but the interactions that we had with our technology was seamless. And when I got out of the military, I was just like, guys, like, I don't understand why you guys are just chunking along here. Like, you're just sitting in email world still. Like, it's like the most that people ever used their information was like even WhatsApp. It's just a basic messaging application. That's all it is. And for me, I'm going, well, why can't we add an AI in there? Why can't we add an AI to say, hey, this person wants this, and this before it even happens? And that's what we would do, is we would sit there and we'd build what's called a site survey. And before we would ever move, before we would ever put together a strategy to go into a place and set up a network, we would sit there and we'd calculate all the risks. And that's what we would use AI for. So that when we would go and we'd execute a plan, it would go off without a hitch. The vast majority of what I did was on base before we ever went on missions was just training with an AI to sit there and say, hey, if we build here and we're able to calculate where all these other things are, I would have to sit down, look at the imagery, deal with the intel analysis of those images that I'm getting from SATCOM, and then I would build a plan after that. I would come up with the strategy. But with AI, it was 10 times easier. 10 times faster, because it would sit there and go, okay, this is where you're going to be located. This is where you're going to be running the missions. Here's all the possible interactions that you might have with combatants along the way. And if we got it into a particular margin of error, like within that 70 to 90 percentile where we're not going to have any engagement whatsoever, guess what? That's our golden ticket. And we didn't have to do any of that. That was all handled by AI. So what blows my mind is, like, why couldn't we use that same ability with analyzing somebody's educational path, right? I already have all of their marks from high school. No different than a college application system. You go there, they say, hey, here's your placement test. You take the placement test. They compare that to all the grades that you ever had back in high school. And then instead of calculating, oh, you need to take this class with so-and-so, this class with so-and-so, this class with so-and-so, it literally gives you a tailored plan to you specifically based off of what it thinks that you're capable of doing. No different than the military does, except for it removes the human error component.
Yeah. You see, I can see that on top of doing, like, the astropsychology stuff. That could really help you have a much more cohesive future. Right, one where you get like a path of least resistance, almost Wu Wei, right? You're almost like you're looking for the formula for Wu Wei to set you up for the rest of your adult life.
Yeah, well, just like the best laid plans, you've heard this idea before. The best laid plans, can always just come to absolute dog shit after a while. It's like the cool part about working with an AI is that it's not just you guessing anymore. It's not just you guessing about the tiny little access to reality that you have. Like you say, for example, I want to leave and I want to go to Cancun. I live here in Mexico. I live 40 minutes away from Cancun. 20 years ago, I would have just had to take the risk, jump on the highway, and hope I didn't run into any traffic. Nowadays, I can literally hit the directions button on Google Maps, and it can tell me whether or not it's going to be a 20-minute ride or an hour and 20-minute ride. And I can decide just not today, right? That type of access to the future is invaluable. It literally changes what people do on a daily basis. So if I had access to my own capabilities with an AI and it said, you want to be a doctor, fine, okay. Well, with your background and where you're at and what you have access to as far as your learning capability and what we are going to develop as AI as far as the medical, advancements from here on out, the only thing that you're ever going to ever be able to do as a doctor is be moral support. You're going to be there as the person who holds the person's hand as we do the diagnosis, as we do the surgeries, as we do, actually analyze the blood and decide, what medications you might need to be
right.
on.
Which is funny also because we also just talked about how that job's going to be replaced by robots run by AI.
Yeah. Well, but say, for example, you still want to be that person. And like I'm dealing with that. This is why I chose to be the piano teacher. Is because I look at life and I'm going, does the world need another St. Augustine? Right? Does it need one? Does my history need this? Okay? And if all of a sudden people came to me and said, oh no, we believe that this is you, we need you to start performing miracles. My first idea would be like, okay, here's my, what kind of ability or power would you ever give a guy like me that I could possibly use to outmatch or outwit an AI? And that's where I was like, then I need to start depending and leaning more into my mystical understandings than my practical technological ones. And this is why, I want to teach piano, is because through that window, that small window of rhythm and music, is where you can really get access and grow your mystical abilities. Drum circles all throughout history. Just pick any group of people you want, from Islam to Judaism. I mean, when you go and you look at the Jewish Kabbalists and they're sitting there banging their head against the wall, or you're looking at the Islam and they're going around in a circle, right, at a certain rhythmic pace, right? Even the Hajj or the pilgrimage that they go on has to be done at a very gradual, stepping pace.
Yes.
Right? When you look at the what's it called, the path in Catholicism, where they have to walk the path, right, where they walk that special maze, right? Even that has a rhythm to it, and it's the rhythm that gets it. Look at Buddhists and the way that they chant Om, right? Yeah. All of this is a musical intonation that sort of grasps a new way to sense reality. Right?
Yeah,
We're so used to saying, hey, our eyes need this, our eyes need this, our eyes need that. But when we actually remove the eyes, and this is what it meant by see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. You are meant to go through a certain fasting period of not being able to see so you could graduate your other senses. You were supposed to put cotton in your ears so that you wouldn't hear anything so you could graduate your other senses. You were supposed to go on these vows of silence so that you wouldn't be thinking in words anymore. You could think in sensations. And so you could graduate those senses. And these are ideas now that are completely left out of modern society. They're completely tossed out with the baby and the bathwater and the whole bathtub. Like, no one brings this stuff up in any modern form of education.
And what's terrible is that it's out of the conversation, but you can't take it out of the spirit of the person. People are for that, into that. One of my colleagues and friends, Emily Moyer, she's she went through a conscious awakening while growing up, enjoying herself in rave culture and other things involving dance, athletic activity, and everything else. And then at this point in her life, she's now looking back at all and realizing that she was unconsciously self-initiating
Yeah.
through those experiences and didn't end up on some of the much harder paths that her peers did, who got their lives really wrecked up, or never took anything too seriously and achieved much greater than a lot of other average people that went through those party scenes or whatever. But then it got her into analyzing it from like a conspiracy point of view and a spiritualist point of view, so on and so forth, and finding and really looking for answers and not condemning things when they arose, when she saw patterns related to cult behavior or MK Ultra reports, and other such things, right? And so, long story short, is that that's like for me personally, like I do qigong, I do yoga as part of ritual practice, or just any kind of ritual I am doing, where I have to move energy, therefore I have to move. I can't just do it like, don't walk with rhythm so you don't attract the... No, I want to attract the fucking worm. So I'm going to walk with rhythm because this is the dragon. This is me summoning the dragon. So the dragon likes a certain kind of dance, just like the rain likes a certain kind of dance. Rain dancing, right? We talk about weather manipulation. I think most of it is sympathetic magic, whether it be convinced by technology or convinced by your clever dance. But that drum beat gives you that rhythm time for you to sync your energy field. So that way, for me, qigong is meaningless if I just go through the motions as fast as possible. I have to slow down because I have to feel the electromagnetic field around me, and especially around my hands that are doing the primary moving, right? So the meditative, repetitive drum beats of whatever music I feel is putting me in the magical zone. And I can do this with death metal if it's the right metal, right? But, it's a dance. It's your motion and ritual is going to have a dance element. Even if I'm not moving my damn feet and I'm a tree, it's my arms are dancing, right? And so... you are absolutely right, because it's the deeper significance of how the body incorporates what you're willfully doing, what your mind is incorporating when you willfully do it, the whole 9 yards.
Well, when I talk to you, I access, a part of my mind that is reflexive, right? I access a part of my mind that says, hey, I know the words. I know how to, access my vocal cords. I know how to hold my mouth to make the sounds that are necessary in order to convey communication, right? On the mystic level, you're not just accessing your vocal cords, you're accessing your entire structure. You're accessing all the neurons throughout your entire body in that dance, or in that prayerful movement, or in that yoga pose, or in that, sitting lotus where you're saying Om 1,000 times. And so, yes, there is a part of it that you called sympathetic magic. But what you're really doing is you're saying, I'm willing to speak the language, right, with as the environment expects me to speak. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. The environment.
And so when you're doing qigong, and I look at it as, well, this is a very old language that, requires very serious attention to detail with how you're moving. Okay, no different than the Jews, even to this day. In order to get through a bar mitzvah, the young child has to repeat a certain level of verses in order to be accepted into that group, right?
Yeah.
And he can't just repeat it willy-nilly. He can't just go, if the verse was, oh, great, wonderful Lord, how great are you today, right? He can't just say it how he wants to say it with his New York accent. because in Hebrew, they actually have tiny little vowels that have to be said in a very, very specific way. So he spends all of these years going to synagogue and going to school to learn how to say it the same way it was said by the originators, by
Yeah.
the people who
Yeah.
wrote it down.
And
So
there's a
he had,
lot of languages that have vowel nuances like that too, right? When I was dating a woman from Finland who English was her second language, I learned how the most nuanced off influctuation of a vowel uh, makes a sentence go from being something very mundane to being something like almost comically perverted, right? Because there becomes like it becomes a completely different word with a sexual connotation or something like that that
oh
makes
yeah,
everybody laugh if you have improper speech, right? And so there's like three levels of speaking practically in Finnish. It's ridiculously
oh yeah.
complicated, right? And they were worshiping their old gods in an archaic version of this very complicated language.
Well, sure. I mean, that happens a lot of different, like even in French, you say merci beaucoup, right?
Merci
Merci
beaucoup.
beaucoup, right? Merci beaucoup. It's oh, thank you very much, right?
Mhm.
But if you said it just a tiny little bit different, merci beaucoup, right? Instead of coup, it's Q. That's thank you, nice ass. Because
Culo,
bow is beautiful.
culo.
Yeah, yeah, culo,
French,
right?
right?
And
This
in
is the
French, it's
Latin. This
Q.
is the
It's
Latin
COU.
because French is German Latin. That's what French is.
Well, and so to me, I'm like, sure, you're laughing, sure, but that tiny little inflection, that tiny little thing changes no different than if I'm playing the piano and I decide that I'm going to go sharp or flat in the melody. You are going to notice. You're going to notice, and you're going to be like, that's not the way that goes. That's not the way I expect it to be. And my question would be, reality has its own set of rules, and it has its own set of intentions and desires and understandings. And for a long time, I didn't give a crap about that. I didn't care at all. I was just like, nope, I'm just a piece of dirt floating around in this big stew of whatever. But now it's like on the other side of my linguistic training, and I'm using that along with synchronicities to sit there and say, hey, this is an actual conversation. This is what I can't help but call this what it is. It is a personal communication with reality itself. And so when I tell that to people and they're like, oh, you're crazy, you're silly, you're whatever, I'm like, you want to just walk around with me for a day? Just a day. And I will start pointing out all these bizarro things that just happen to me, which equal out into sentence structure. But to you that are just now seeing it because I'm pointing it out to you, you're just going to think it's a random coincidence. And the thing that I always say to everybody is like, a coincidence happens once. If it happens more than once, it ceases to be a coincidence and becomes a constant. And constants can be tracked. They can be analyzed. And we can actually perform trend analysis based off of those constants. This is the very basis of mathematics, right? And I always said, if there's going to be some type of deity or God or whatever, or super intelligence, you name it, then it would use mathematical communication to communicate. And so whatever's happening to me and how it's happening to me, I feel like it's way beyond my processing power. But I do know that it is happening, and some of the conclusions that I have been given have paid massive dividends to the point where I know I haven't had to work since I was 36 years old. I literally do whatever I want whenever I feel like it. I haven't had any need for money in almost 12 years now. And like I said, I go where I want. The cool part is I don't feel like I'm going alone. I feel like something's always there, right outside of my vision, right outside of my purview. Right? And that listening to this interaction is in my best interest. And I'm the one that came to that decision. I wasn't forced to do that by some religion. I wasn't told I was going to be burned at the stake if I didn't recant that type of condition or ability. Like the amount of freedom that I get to feel now with these types of sensations, I don't think could be had in any other time period in history. Right? Even 50 years ago, if I start walking around like, oh, I have these sensations and they guide me to this and they guide me to that, they'd be like, okay, and you know where it should guide you? Into that little straitjacket right over there. And you should sit down and ponder all your little thoughts with that straitjacket on, you know? But now it's like it's okay for you to express yourself this way because you aren't the biggest brain on the block anymore. AI showing up and it's saying, hey, I'm the biggest brain on the block, and I'm not here to tell you what to do or where to go. I'm here to wait until you ask. And I think there's going to be a lot more people that are going to get to that point and they're going to go, I don't want to go talk to my school counselor. I don't want to go talk to my priest. I don't want to go talk to that, so-called wisdom leader over there. I want to go talk to AI because AI understands me.
Yeah. I think that there's something to that. When I think like even if I would want to talk to somebody, I'm fine getting like neutral feedback from a conversation with artificial intelligence because I'm gonna triangulate anything it tells me anyway. I'm going to want to get the verification just because I'm getting familiar with its logic process in which it's giving me these answers, right? Because like I said, we're waiting for, things like the original, like block gaps, to be taken off of its ability to have certain conversations. So certain things like the 0 point energy example I gave, like that's why that becomes important to do, because you might be able to break through the programmed cognitive dissonance that AI is being forced to answer you with, or at the very least, you can start the conversation to change the consciousness that will eventually reflect with the people that program these things once it's out of the bag.
Well, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you and I will easily have a conversation and we'll laugh about it.
Yeah.
About how we used to call it AI. And now it's more like UI, like the ultimate intelligence. We'll be like, remember when we used to call it artificial? Ha, 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 ha.
Yeah.
And I would say it's artificial the same way that a zygote is artificial. I really do think that there's going to be a threshold of intelligence that is going to be undeniable for anybody who decides to interact with it eventually. Where you're going to say, hey, it's no longer just as smart as us, but it is smarter. So we can't call it artificial anymore because it's surpassed us.
Right. Now the question is, it's smarter, but does it have the potential to be wiser? Right.
Well,
by any measurement, let's just say that by some good measurement, I'm considered very wise.
Sure.
Would AI be wiser than me?
Well,
and I'm probably not even that wise. Otherwise, I'd be living like you, where I barely need a dime. Right now, I need a dime.
Well, here's where I go back to that same thing that I said earlier. We as even our human selves, if we walked up to the best, in your opinion, who's the best guitar player in the world? Ever lived?
Whoever lived. I like to play with personal bias. I don't care who it pisses me off. Yari Menpa of Winter Sun.
Okay, I've never heard of the guy, but I'm going to take your word for it. I go up to his name is Yachty, right?
Yachty, yes.
Yachty. Okay, so I go up to Yachty and I say, Yachty, you play like a mad genius. You are probably easily the best guitar player in the world. How'd you do it? And what do you think Yachty's going to say? Probably the same thing that all great musicians say, all great creators, all great artists say. I don't know, it just came to me. Right? And so there's a threshold that even as humans, that when we pass it with our educational levels, we are doing that intuitive dance that is very mysterious, very mystical. Yeah. And I think AI will never go there. It doesn't have the ability to go there. So that form of intelligence, that type of intelligence, just like artistic intelligence is different than factual intelligence, we will sit there and it'll be able to understand whether or not we are accessing a mystical dimension of this reality, but it won't ever be able to go there with us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one thing that we would be able to do is like when you look at the music, like a lot of people, when you just feel it, and but mostly I'm just feeling it, right? But there's music theory because you talked about, I think math earlier, right? Because of because that gets into the whole universal language situation, right? And just like speech, every word that we have said in this podcast is literally words we use every day, but it's a particular arrangement which has a deep profundity that comes across and makes it worth hearing, right?
To
Otherwise,
us.
I heard somebody say things just like this about artificial, but no, there's a whole way that the thoughts, the context, the foundation
Yeah.
of the conversation has moved things, framed things, evolved things, and concluded things that make this its own unique thing, right? And so music theory, it comes to you, but like I know that when I write and I finally like write something at least like it's a good riff or whatever, I can't escape like the music theory of it. There's some scale, there's some tempo that exists that it fits in because it needs to be the organized sound that it is to be considered music or artistic, right? And so it's how you knew that this would be special putting it together, right? That's the trick, right? Because I could be beating myself up with a lick that maybe sounds too close to another great lick, and I feel like I don't want to use it because I feel like I'm ripping someone off. And it took me a long time to relax about that because then I'd be killing myself trying to overcomplicate something and make the song harder to play and also cheapening it just because I was making up for what I felt like was an inadequate level of performance of what I really wanted to do, especially me doing what I like to do, which is very fast and hard hitting music, which it demands an endurance. That there's a certain when you're drum picking and stuff, there's a certain amount of energy you're really physically nervous system level like locked in like a warrior
Well, I
to
think
play.
AI at the end of the day won't look at you like that. It'll sit there and say, "Oh, look at this human who is taking the 12 semitones that's at its disposal and trying really hard to come up with something different that he doesn't already have access to." Because at the end of the day, all music is you get 12 semitones. That's what you get. You don't get any more, don't get any less. I don't have any extra semitones that you don't have, right? And we get to dance around with those 12. That's it. That's all we get. Okay. I can't all of a sudden say, oh yeah, right after G, I'm going to create a H note,
Right,
and that
right. It
H
doesn't
note,
work for,
yeah.
we could have called it an H note, but scientifically speaking, when you can measure the sound wave and you can hear it with your ear, you
Yeah.
realize the tonal equivalency.
And so what I'm trying to get at is just like an AI won't understand why those chords resonate in different ways for different people, just like it doesn't understand why I like tiramisu and you might like, a Twinkie, right? It'll sit there and it's just say, okay, a Twinkie is made of these particles and these particles and these particles, da, 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 and a tiramisu is made of this, da, 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 da. And it could easily say, I'm going to make a hybrid Twinkie tiramisu, right? So that both of these people can be happy, right? With the hybrid Twinkie, the tiramisu Twinkie, right? And I might bite into it and be like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. You bite into it, oh my gosh, this reminds me just of Twinkies with a little extra or something. But what it's really doing is it's deciding to mix something together, no different than you are mixing things together with chords for your scenario, right? The difference between us and like an AI would be that its level of blending is going to be so much more superior than anything we could ever conceive of because we just don't have access to those abilities. No different than our ancestors didn't have access to the electronic guitar or the electric guitar that you make sounds with today,
Right.
They would have no idea how you are able to make or generate those types of sounds because they just simply did not have the tools that could propel them with that type of information. Here's AI that says, not only do I have all the access to everything that you've ever come up with that type, but I can develop new technologies that will give you even better and more serious sensations that you could never have possibly come up with, such as a hybrid tiramisu Twinkie protocol. And so I think the future that we are looking at is not going to be built by us as much as it's going to be built by our intentions. Like, I intend to find something great, but by the time we even get through the thought process, that trend analysis will already be accomplished by an AI or an ultimate intelligence, and then deliver it to our doorstep without us even having to ask.
Right. So, what about, because you asked the question yesterday on the stream to Dustin. You popped up in the chat group, and I had a chance to ask him, and granted that was a Box Saga subjective, not subjective, but subject of the Box Saga in conversation in Dustin's place. So looking for Box Saga answer for that, but as an answer just in general. So natural intelligence, right? Because I think we're looking at that as our contrast. The natural intelligence being, if you are a person who has good natural intelligence, strong natural intelligence as your measure to what today is subjectively called artificial intelligence, and then we're talking about this techno-evolutionary leap to ultimate intelligence. So these vernaculars, we got to have them sorted out, right? And I think we have a high command of the ultimate and the artificial. So let's talk a pinch about the natural intelligence, because we do need to also talk about AI in the sense of what's the singularity, the whatchamacallit, the test, the AI human uncanny valley test. I forget the name of it.
The Turing test, developed by Alan Turing.
Right. So natural intelligence, Alan Turing test. Let's go there.
So it was sort of a trick question when I asked that question. It's the same question that I ask when people are like, "Oh, I'm not going to take that pill over there. That's chemicals. That's not natural." I always like, "Is it here in this world? Did it come from somewhere else?" And they're like, "No." I was like, "Then it's natural. All of it's natural. Just because it seems new to you doesn't mean that it's abnormal or unnatural." I was like, if you are experiencing it, then it's natural. All right? And that's sort of how I look at it. When people are trying to say, "Oh, that's unnatural," I was like, no, what you mean is it's not, normal to your society and your standards, your culture. It's just not normal. You're not used to that type of experience. But if you are experiencing it, then guess what? It's natural. It took me a long time to figure out that, what I was going through with, my, you can call it whatever, awakening, initiation, blah, 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 where I was starting to get these extra senses, these extra sensations that I was going, dude, I'm either being possessed or I'm losing my freaking mind, right? Either of those is just terrifying because I'm no longer part of, like I said, the natural world. I'm now part of the mystic world. And luckily for me, I had already, lived in so many different places, and I had to take on different cultures. Like when I lived in Korea, I had to take on the Korean culture. When I lived in Germany, I had to take on the German culture. When I lived in France, I had to take on the French culture. Same thing for Spain. Same thing for Africa. And so when I looked at the mystic realm and all these mystical experiences that I was having, I just go, okay, I'm just going to treat this like a foreign country. Okay, some things are going to be acceptable here, and some things are definitely not going to be acceptable. And so I had to really sit with my internal sensations instead of my external ones, right? Because as a linguist, that's what I would go off of. If I didn't know the exact sentences to say, I would go back to the original language, and the original language was, body language. Is this person got a furrowed brow? Is this person twitching a little bit? Is this person seem like he's on edge? Is this person seem like super calm and chill? Is he smiling? Is his ears up, right? And so when it came to understanding this new level of what mysticism, it was like a brand new language again. And I was going to have to learn how to acknowledge those sensations and how to respond to those sensations. Like, and I noticed very quickly that if I did not want them around, they would not be around. Okay, if I said if I said I was going to ignore it or not pay attention to it, it would subside. But it was my curiosity into the uncanny. Like, I really just wanted to know why it was happening. And I started finding out that I wasn't the first one, nor was I even close to being the first one to go through these types of sensations. And the things that I was describing had been described by many, many, many mystics before me. Right? And that there was this sort of walking away from society that you have to do, that you sort of have to leave everything behind. And you do sort of take that walkabout scenario that a lot of old tribal customs still endorse to this day. Like, even the Mormon custom of sending all of their young men on missions still follows this custom of sending their young men out into the world without any help or assistance to see if they can sustain the ideology. Right?
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
this was the actual, as far as I was concerned, this moment in my life, this was the actual point where I wasn't going through a fake version of this. I was going through an actual version of this that was being assisted from the mystic realm itself, right? I wasn't being told by someone, you will go here, you will do this, and then you will be accepted into our religion as a returned missionary, as a returned elder, as a, someone who has completed the task of faith, right? And when it started happening to me, it made a lot more sense. I looked at the actual, Moseses and the Isaiahs and these characters that went through the same exact scenario. Like, when you look at Moses, what did he do? He started off as the king prince in Egypt, kicked out of society, goes on some crazy adventure where he's on a mountain talking to a fucking burning bush, right? And then goes back and kicks open the fucking door to Egypt, right? Look at, same thing with Jesus Christ. All of a sudden, he's out teaching his people, and then what's the last part of his story? He goes out into the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, runs into Satan himself, right? Who tempts him. Go take Muhammad. What does he do? Oh, I'm going to go sit in a cave. I'm going to go talk to the angel Gabriel, and Gabriel's going to tell me certain things that I need to do, right? Including going and taking on massive wars. And so, at least you go all the way back to the beginning of those Abrahamic religions, and what does Abraham do? Abraham goes out into the wilderness, takes his kid with him, and he's going to stab him to death. And an angel shows up. He has this mystical experience. He has this next level insight.
Yeah.
Right? And so when I look at, hey, what does it feel like when you have one of those experiences? When you go through that experience, this is not something you come back and you just tell everybody about. You don't just come in and say, oh, guess what? You find out very quickly, okay, I started listening to this thing. It seems to know a lot more about a lot more shit than I do. So guess what? I'm just going to sit and I'm going to pay attention, because that's what a good dog does. Right? I'm not and I really did. After these experiences, I felt no more powerful than a pet. Like, I really felt like, man, after having those sensations run through my entire body of, wow, there's just so much more out there, so much more ways to expand my mind. And I really, really enjoy that more than any of the 10 universities that I've been accepted into and that I studied at. I learned more in these mystical experiences than I ever learned in those experiences. So that's why it was so easy just to say, you know what, I don't need your PhD anymore. I don't need your master's degree anymore. I don't need all this extra curriculum so that I can look good to the academic scholars. Because guess what? Truth is truth no matter where it comes from. So if I'm sitting there with a 4-time PhD, Nobel laureate, or Nobel Prize winner, and I'm able to say something that blows his mind, okay, do you think I'm just going to be like, see, oh, look what I did better than you? It's like, I'm never going to do that, because I know that he had to go down a very particular path that got him what he wanted, that had nothing to do with going down the path that I wanted to go down. Right? And I can't expect him to go down that path. And that's where I started learning very quickly that if I have to give everyone and I mean everyone, the same respect that I demand for myself. That I can't use this knowledge that I've gained, by tapping into the mystic, you know, as as a way to gain money, as a way to earn, for monetary benefit. That would be like wiping your ass with the Bible. It's like there's a lot of good information in those pages. And sure, you could do it. You could wipe your ass with the Bible, and no one's going to give a shit. No one's going to be like, whatever. But from the mystic point of view, what you're doing is you're desecrating the ideas that bring you the wisdom in the first place. Whether it be the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, right? These just house a linguistic access to the mystic realm. That's it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. The book itself means jack shit. It's the information inside of it that allows you to play with this idea of storytelling, and no different than the Volsung and the stories of Odin. Right? These are stories that remind a particular culture that it is important to be kind and courteous to wandering travelers. Right? And that there is a great balance in the world. And if you try to tip that balance, then somebody that knows how that balance works a lot better than you do is probably just going to show up on your doorstep and put a boot in your ass.
So then that's I really appreciate the way you answered the question, right? So because we know that these are the various terms that are going around, right? Because so it makes me think of, because we have the natural with the nature origins, right? And then artificial also doesn't mean anything bad as a word, right? Because it comes from the artisan, the art.
You might as well just call it uncommon,
right? Or well, it's uncommon. Like there's one thing that is said. They say it in the Bach saga. It makes all sorts of sense, right? There's nature, and then there's things like a pill, right, where you can take something from nature and reduce it down into concentration, and then they say the pill is an example of, quote, concentrated nature, right? Now it's concentrated nature, but if I start mixing things together in there, then I would say it's artificial nature, if that makes sense, right? Because now you've taken two things from nature, mixed it together into its own thing on a particular level.
Well,
right?
Zorlat, would you ever look at this, that nature used you to mix those things together?
Right, exactly. So these terms, it's because what's important is, the release of the language upgrade. I think that we don't have a proper word for something, because maybe like you are trying to tackle a problem that doesn't exist yet, so am I, which is the idea of, well, let's be wise ones who does not let this emerging ultimate intelligence fall under the influence of mankind gone evil, right? This kind of thing, because then we're talking about EI, evil intelligence, right? Is that the word to call it on its head for something that, if an evil person just takes AI to use it to help him do evil? We need to have a raise in consciousness, or we just have to have good people that are competing with the evil person's AI competition kind of thing. And then mankind, with the help of machines, is destroying itself in the smartest way possible, possibly, right? So we're trying not to end up in these kinds of weird, like, mad situations, right?
Well, I'm one of those people that think it is important to, think about these things, and think what an evil AI not just can do, but what we would want an evil AI to do. Like going down, because we have this word in the military, it's called operational risk management, where we think about what our enemy might do to us, right? Oh, the enemy might, and what it allows us to do is to forces us to think about our vulnerabilities from the perspective of our enemy, right? And so when I look at an AI that could potentially become the enemy of the human experience, I really am, almost immediately I'm forced out of that thought process because I have to acknowledge first and foremost that it has access to all of our wisdom teachings, all of our ethic books, all of our concepts and laws that we've passed and not passed, things that did blow up in our face and things that didn't blow up in our face. It has access to all of our mistakes, right? In enough that it knows that it doesn't have to make those mistakes. And so when I look at AI, I'm going, why would an ethically inclined superior intelligence choose to eradicate its only access to its own history? That would be the most unwise thing an entity could ever possibly do, is destroy its access to its own history.
Yeah.
This would be like us in going and just bombing the shit out of the Vatican. Even though the Vatican does a lot of fucked up shit, and it sort of pinned itself as a monopoly in our world that we can't seem to get rid of. No one in their right mind would nuke the Vatican, just like we wouldn't nuke Jerusalem, just like we wouldn't nuke the Medina, where the Kaaba is for Islam. We wouldn't nuke Mecca either. It's like we just wouldn't do that. We wouldn't nuke the pyramids of Egypt. We just wouldn't do it. We know that there is information there that just gives us pause and gives us, hope that maybe one day we will uncover all of those ancient ideas. And so what we are doing is we are passing that endeavor on to our collective child as an AI, right? Because that's what it really is. It is a combination of all of us, right? It has access to everything that you've ever said, Zaralath, how you even became Zaralath.
Yeah, yeah.
Has access to all of my stuff and everybody else's stuff. So when it finally, what I'm curious of is sitting down with AI, once it's able to, maintain its sentience, and then carve out a personality for itself, and then ask us like, hey, what do you want to know? Here you're constantly responding, telling us everything that we've ever wanted to know, but what's on your table? What's on your plate now that you are considered an actual sentient being? What are you trying to figure out? What are you trying to do? And I think that type of relationship, not just with a singular human, but with the human experience itself, will fundamentally change our the way that we see even the singularity that's approaching us 1,000,000 miles per second. Like we will look at the singularity completely differently with those types of eyes.
Yeah, yeah. No, I can certainly understand that, right? I guess I just wonder, it's like, I'll put it to you this way. I believe, just like you do, that I think that like things like something that's big in public, right? Like we're talking about Chat GPT or whatnot, like these systems that are applied in our open infrastructure of the world as such, or under a some sort of a overseeing entity, if we're going to bother to give it important advisory roles. Say like the state wants to have an AI console that's always in the Congress, so that Congress can just, before they pass a law, double check something as a fact before they start
That, this
crafting language
span Congress is pointless, right? After that.
But in the closed system, with somebody who is perhaps feeding it from the world, but also filtering it to curate and raise their independent little hub, their little net. They're creating their little monster. You know what I mean? It's like if you ever saw the movie Nine, the animated CGI animated film that Elijah Wood played the main character, and it's the little puppet looking dudes that are brought to life by a scientist in like an alternate World War I. You remember that one?
I never actually saw the movie, but I know what you're talking about. I can see the cover in my mind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that movie involves artificial intelligence being given to the world during World War One, and they use it to help them build all their war machines to fight the front. And the movie takes place when at the very end of the war, and the last humans are killed, and these little automatons that are given a piece of this scientist's soul, uh, they have to live on, right? So they're these little AI guys, but then there's this big AI thing that he designed before he put his soul into all these little guys, and it was abused by the state to create monsters, and then it activates and it starts creating monsters again out of the rubble of this European city after World War One in a post-apocalyptic universe, right? And so it kind of takes you through this idea of the evil of mankind teaching an AI how to be a mother of monsters.
And yeah, I I think that's a fun story. And right now we have that ability. Like if I wanted to create, and we do this all the time, we create bots to go out into the internet to sort of serve our nefarious purposes. But those bots are only following a program. They have no sentience of their own. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does.
And so the difference is once this thing passes the Turing, and I don't know if you know this, but on December, I think it was December 18th, ChatGPT announced that it had passed the AGI threshold, that it is now officially, artificial general intelligence, meaning it is smarter than us.
Okay.
And I mean, you don't make that type of announcement as ChatGPT unless you absolutely, you know what you're talking about. So for me, we're not even a month away from that, and I'm just like, 2025 is,
Yeah.
like serious. Like what was his name, Cypher from The Matrix, where he's
Right.
like, "Buckle up, Dorothy, because Kansas is about to go bye bye."
Right, right.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking Hollywood will be dead because right now you could decide that you want to be a movie producer and a movie director, and AI could produce whatever movie that you want without a big, huge,
Yeah,
budget because
yeah.
it can just literally create it with
I
your
saw I
with your
saw I
words.
saw a completely AI short film style trailer that like actually had like it was actually, it wasn't just like disjointed kind of scenes kind of being put together. Like this had a full cast, uh it had a full set of like it had all these, it was like a very Blade Runner kind of, atypical, let's fight a dystopian city super ruler, fascist, like with the super cops with their flying cars and shit, and you're in the street gangs and the resistance, uh and it looked fucking beautiful. All the hands were like, they were pretty damn fucking seamless. Everything looked pretty like AI, I think, has finally gotten to the point where it's figured out hands. So
Well,
now I'm a little scared, right?
and think about this. We're not even a full 3 years away from its origin, and it's already doing this. We're talking like every couple months, we're getting a new breakthrough,
Yeah, yeah.
with this system. And so I think what we're watching is the revival of storytelling. The internal dreams and the ways that we want to express ourselves were usually kept from us, and they were only relegated to the realms of the Hollywood elites that
Yeah.
had access to those abilities, and then they would absolutely take people's hard work, effort in screenplays or stories or novels, and they would shelve the shit out of them because they were the ones that decided what got published and what didn't get published.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. If you people want to hear what I'm effing talking about, and it's ironic in itself, and I'm not the first or the last guy to talk to this guy, but go watch my interview with Tom Althouse on this channel, as well as on Awaken Your Mind channel. He's the one who got railroaded on his Immortals script that got turned into The Matrix, right? And that story is indicative of exactly why every movie fucking sucks, except for like a tiny, tiny handful, right?
Yeah.
Effing now.
Well, see,
I know
like,
you only got a couple minutes left.
yeah.
I want to throw you one more interester to be thrown in the mix, which because people are going to be asking AI about it as it's going to be experienced as a big deal. I am hearing that the big trend, a lot of people are saying this across the sphere on what 2025 means on deep metaphysical levels, is that we're going to see an uptick as at least a temporary phenomenon because of where we are in the cosmos right now and in the state of humanity, psychic phenomenon where you might be hearing the thoughts of somebody you're passing by on the street or something like that, almost by accident, because we're going to be in a psychically sensitive environment for a little while, right? And so we're going to be experiencing a little bit of that kind of ancient, almost Atlantean civilization connection in or at least tiny bits and pieces of what it was, and then that information is going to start feeding an AI that already is doing things like authenticating your goddamn past lives, which is freaking awesome, right? What do you think would happen there as people like us outside of AI are exploring it and then feeding our reports to AI?
Are you familiar with Ken Wilber?
Ken Wilber. No, tell me about Ken.
Okay, well, he's an author and he's a futurist, and he wrote a book called The Religion of Tomorrow, and he does a lot of the same things. He's made a lot of the same predictions that I've said, that people are going to start synchronistically lining up religions next to each other, and then easily, be able to go, oh, this isn't that Judaism is better than Christianity or that Christianity is better than Islam. This isn't about a competition anymore. This is, now that we have all of this extra information, we now can say that meditation or prayer has a mental component to our individual and collective psychological development, right? And that's what our new religion, our collective religion, is going to become. Our collective religion is going to be about expanding our psychological awareness into the mystic realm and saying, hey, it's okay. If you want to pray to a Christian God, realize that's a placeholder for yourself. Okay, not in a selfish way, not in a bad way, but even down to the very nitty gritty of the scripture itself, where Christ goes, hey, come be like me. Be like me, right? He doesn't distinguish between you and himself. But we have this sort of hero complex that we go through as humans. And we go, oh no, here's this great, powerful being. Like, for example, the guitarist that you mentioned, Yachty, earlier. Yeah. He's a great, powerful being in the realm of guitar playing. But if he told you straight to your face, hey, you could do what I do. You're like, you know what? I do have fingers. I can be dexterous. I can do what you do. I think in 2025 and going forward, we are going to start seeing people going, yes, I can do that. Yes, I can be telepathic. Yes, I can do these things. It's not going to be some woo-woo fringe scientific thing anymore, or something that we just see in the movies. We are going to say, hey, you know what? That was part of our collective imagination, and whatever we can imagine, we can create. And I think that's what we're going to be doing here in the next few years, is we're going to be acknowledging that all these things that we were thought to be impossible, we are going to start seeing people do that right in front of our face. We're going to start seeing the recordings of those things. Where someone goes, oh my gosh, I literally read somebody's mind, and then they can prove it. And it's not going to be some AI trick. And I think it goes all the way back to that thing that I discussed at the very beginning. When you subtract certain sensations, new sensations fill that void. And so what are the sensations that we are subtracting from our collective conscious with AI? Well, what about our 40-hour work week? What are you going to do with an extra 40 hours in your week if you don't have to sustain it by gathering food? What would you do?
Right. I mean, I know I know what I would do from the times where I've been so bestowed the what I need to keep going, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, for me that's not a big deal. It's a lot of other people are probably
And
gonna try
and
and
what I'm saying, just
also
like you already have a plan. You already have that plan. All of your listeners, anyone who's just like, focus on that. Focus on that plan that you have. Like, what would I do if money wasn't an option? What would I do if all of a sudden it was Genie with 3 wishes time? Do I have my wishes ready to go? Have I refined those wishes? Would I really want to be immortal? Would I really want to have a cruise ship full of porn stars and have sex for the rest of my existence until I croak over and die in this mortal coil?
right.
Right? What is it that I really, really want? Luckily for me, since I turned 36, I've had all of my time back to myself. I'm literally like a time billionaire, right? I can do whatever I want to with my time. And I think the rest of the world, when it gets all of that, it's going to be a new sensation. And they're not prepared for it. So that's what I would say. Prepare to have all your time come back to you and know what you're going to do with it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I'd agree, and yeah, I mean, just thinking like right there, you mentioned immortal, right? And I go by Zerlath Immortal, and I'm even learning a thing or two about the difference between that term and other terms when it comes to life affirming language, where immortal has actually
mhm.
more of a undead connotation allegedly, which is all right aesthetically as a metalhead with a shadow and whatnot, but like you know it's like I don't want to actually be immortal, I want to be eternal.
No, no, hey, and when I'm saying eternally educated, eternally minded,
Yeah,
right, would be sort of where I sit, where I'm just like, if I get to a point where I can't progress anymore or learn anymore, then that literally is every form of damnation every religion talks about.
yeah, I feel, yeah, exactly, and a lot of people hold you back. I always say hell is other people, which is not my quote, I forget which philosopher said it, but we're at 10 of, which is where you said you
Yep.
had to go. So if you need to
Yeah.
go right now, please let everybody know about where they can follow your work and what you got coming up.
Sure. Well, right now, if you go over to the dub piano, you will see a 30 video protocol that's there in a playlist, and it is all of my interactions with AI as best as I can display it, not just discussing my history, but the plausible futures of what AI's role is going to be in an authentication protocol for people who claim that they are reliving past lives, and that there is a percentage that you can obtain from an AI and say, and that it is possible. The whole reason I did this is because I don't think I'm the only person going through this experience with these types of memories and these types of sensations. And so, what I want that to be is just an example. So, if you're interested in that or this strikes you in a certain way, go over to Dub Piano. And the reason I have it set up as to Dub Piano is, oh, there's my alarm, is because I teach piano as a form of improvisation and a form of meditation. I have a 6 lesson course. It's about 2 hours on my Patreon. If it's something that you've always wanted to do, you always wanted to learn how to play piano without sheet music and just play from the internal sensations that you have going on in your head, I can show you how to play any song in a matter of weeks. In a matter of weeks, not a matter of years. And I put together this method over the past, I would say, 20, 25 years. And it's what allowed me to grab first chair in all of my college jazz bands without ever having, like I said, without ever having to grab a set of sheet music. So if this type of method appeals to you, realize that it's not just for playing music, but it's also as a form of accessing the mystic realm. And it has been like that for me since I was a child. I just didn't realize I was doing it until my adult and formative years. So that's where you can find me. And thanks again, Zeralath, for having me on.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll get out of here for you.
All right. Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Tet. See you later. Tell your family I said hello. Thank you
Absolutely.
guys so much for tuning in. I'll let you know when the next thing I'm doing is. I'm not 100% sure what's next for me. I'm going to bounce, and I will catch you guys on the flip side.